Hello there, everybody. This is Forest Weaver, your dear cleric, and welcome you all to Tasting History with Max Miller's video, Hatshepsut. I don't really know how to pronounce this Egyptian name. The Pharaoh they tried to erase from history. So we're back with it with Max Miller, learning about history as well as various other like culinary items from back then. You can see a sigillith in the background. Is I think even some mummification like organ jars in the background. Wonder how he got those. Anyway, without further ado, let's get going.
Greatest pharaohs was nearly lost from history. Hatshepsut, Egypt's most
Hatshepsut.
famous female pharaoh.
Okay.
A woman with a fascinating story and an even more
here.
fascinating mortuary temple featuring images of her great exploits as well as many depictions of food for the gods and her afterlife.
Ooh,
so today
that'd
I
be
will
fun.
endeavor to recreate one of those foods as I examine the life of Egypt's nearly forgotten queen, Hatshepsut. So thank you to Amma Waterways for sponsoring this video as we make
Amma
ancient
Waterways?
Egyptian zalabia. This time
What?
tasting history.
Like, is that like supposed like a tourist spot or something? That's funny.
I just returned from Egypt where I was hosting 50 fans of Tasting History on a river cruise down the Nile with Amma Waterways.
Oh,
was
okay.
a
It's probably like
life-changing experience
a
for me. It was
tourist
like
sort of
getting
thing.
to see all of these sites in person
That looks pretty cool,
that I had
though.
only read about in books. It defies explanation. And what was really great is Amma Waterways provided us with Egyptologists to give context to all of the things that we were seeing. What I really loved was
cool.
wherever we went, there were images of food. The ancient Egyptians just loved to include these images in their tombs and temples, often as an offering to God or as sustenance for the deceased in the afterlife.
Guess
Now,
you
some
gotta
of these
always eat
images
when you're
are
dead,
very clear
as
what
they know.
are, like bread or a leg of beef, but then some of them are less obvious, like this little image of a hippo is actually a hippo cake. And were I a fan of ancient aliens, I would have assumed that this stack of ribs in the Temple of Horus was actually a Wi-Fi symbol. It is not a Wi-Fi symbol, they are ribs, and I will be doing a video on both the ribs and that hippo cake in the future.
I think I will put this back down.
Today, I wanted to try to recreate this stack of balls which appeared in many of the temples
Balls,
that
you say?
we went to. Frankly,
Egypt
it
loves
could
their
be
balls.
A number of things, because while the ancient Egyptians loved giving us images of the food, they didn't usually give descriptions of the food, and they didn't leave us any actual recipes.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot more harder.
Guess what the image is. And when it comes to this pile of balls, our fantastic Egyptologist Walla suggested that they might be an early version of a dessert which is still eaten today and has since the 10th century been known as zalabia. So to make a version that would have been something
almost like kind of like a
available,
dango or
perhaps, to
something.
Queen Hatshepsut, I am going to only use ingredients that were available to the ancient Egyptians. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 4 cups or 500 grams of emmer flour.
Emmer
this
flour?
is the most common type of wheat growing in ancient
okay, that's
Egypt
a
at the
type of
time.
wheat,
You
okay.
can also use barley, but it's going to be even harder than working with emmer flour. You can also just use modern flour as well. Then 1.5 tablespoons of dried yeast, 2.5 cups or 600 milliliters of warm water, a quarter
They
cup
probably just
or
had like
85 grams of
regular
honey,
live
1
yeast from
tablespoon of salt, and 2
the
teaspoons of
air.
cardamom. So first,
Because I don't know if they
activate the
had,
yeast by
like,
mixing it
dried
with a little
yeast.
of the honey in about 1/2 cup of the water, and then whisk the salt and the cardamom.
I guess that
into
makes
the
sense.
flour. Once
To have the
is
yeast
active,
be in
add
the
it to flour
in
along
the
with
honey
the
because
rest of
like
the
it's
honey,
sweet,
then add
and
in the
that's like
water
sustenance
and
from them.
begin to mix. Now this is going to be a very wet dough, more of a stiff batter, and it can be hard to work with, especially because since we're using emmer flour, it has a lower gluten content than most modern flour.
Look how
so
sticky that
you're
is.
just going to have to work it for maybe a little
That's
bit
also, like,
longer
very
than you
liquidy,
are
too.
accustomed
Yikes.
to. And even after about 15 or 20 minutes of kneading this by hand, it might seem like you're just not going to get there, but cover it with a cloth and leave it for about an hour and a half, and it should rise and the gluten will continue to develop. After about 90 minutes, you can come back. It should be nice and puffed up and a little bit stretchy. And then you can heat some fat for frying.
Oh wow!
Now, ghee or clarified butter would have been available.
Look at you can see like the convection currents in that oil or fat.
From beef, So you can use any of those, but all of those are kind of expensive to be deep frying things in. So if you want to just use some like grapeseed oil or another oil that has a high smoke point, that works just fine. And you're going to want that high smoke point.
Look at that. That's like a high,
about 325
like a really high quality camera to get all that.
Now, once it's heated, we need to form the dough or the batter into balls. And I actually hosted a cooking demonstration on
Oh wow, look at him.
Chef did it all with his hand, so that's what I attempted to do, and it is not as easy as he made it look. Essentially, you gather up a handful of the dough,
he's
kind of
squeeze out a ball from the hand. Ugh.
Like
squeezing the balls.
And then
be careful of that.
It off between your thumb and index finger and use a spoon to transfer the little ball of dough into the oil. Now, when I say little, I mean little, because the first dozen that I made were way too big.
Yeah.
And you don't want them too big because the outside
is not going to cook as much, right?
Before the inside is cooked. So you'll end up with like raw dough on the inside. Honestly, you want them bite-sized. The smaller the better. I made several dozen, and I didn't really get the hang of it until about the last 5 or 6. But those were beauties.
Yeah,
Let
they
them
do
fry
look
in the
nice.
oil for about 2 to 3 minutes, turning them as they cook, and you're looking for them to have a nice golden brown color. The thing is, since I am using emmer wheat, it's kind of hard to tell when
it's already pretty
gets
brownish.
to that color because
it's already
the
tan.
flour itself is already darker than most modern flours, so I just kind of had to guess. Once fried, transfer them to a wire rack over some paper towel and let them drain as you finish frying the rest. And like I said, the chef aboard the Amalilia was able to do these so well. He was a true professional. They were all uniform size, and he was so fast. He could get like 10 out in the time that it took me to do one.
That's
frankly, they were perfectly round and mine were not. But
years of training.
He was a great chef who has done this for a long time, so what was I to expect? And it is because
oh wow, look at that spread.
A high point that I decided
those
to
desserts
work with Ama Waterways in setting up these different river cruises that I'm leading. In addition to that, the ship itself is just so luxurious, and it really is the best
look really
way
nice.
to see Egypt. Nearly everything in ancient Egypt was built within like a couple miles of the Nile itself. And so when you travel with Ama Waterways, the ship can take you from stunning monument to stunning monument without the need for you to change hotels. In fact, I enjoyed it and the river cruise that I did down the Danube last October so much that I
love
am
that castle.
planning to do several more. I had really hoped to have the information on those cruises for you today, but I don't. But as soon as I do have information on those, I will share it here. They're really a great way to travel.
That looks like it's a Cambodian sort of
like
temple there.
They
like
have
some
such
sort of
a
Chinese.
focus on education. You learn so much when you travel with them. I mean, they provided us Egyptologists for the entire cruise. Like, our Egyptologist was named Walla, and when we went to go visit the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, he made sure that we knew everything about her story before we got there. And now I can tell you a bit about her story.
Okay, here's the real history time. So tell me about this.
Know about the chronology
ancient,
of the rulers
ancient
of
queen.
ancient Egypt comes from the king lists, which were kept by the pharaohs themselves. These lists included the names of each of the pharaohs since the unification of Egypt some 5,000 years ago. Or at least they should include all of the names of the pharaohs. But sometimes there would be pharaohs that were left out. Sometimes 1 or 2 here, sometimes entire dynasties just not included.
Why?
And it does seem that this is not because of scribal error as much as perhaps political reasons. Like on the Abydos king list of Ramses II, the kings of the Amarna period, like Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, were left out, likely due to the fact that the former had turned his back on most of the gods, instead preferring to practice monotheism.
Interesting.
Several other names were also left off, including Hatshepsut. And this caused some confusion for early Egyptologists when they did come across her name in other locations, especially when that name was associated with a male ruler.
Oh, they didn't want like a
image of a male ruler.
They didn't want like a
As
female,
the hieroglyphs, Jean-François Champollion put it, "Astonished was I to find upon reading the inscriptions."
Look at his like full wraparound beard.
King in the
40.
usual dress
Wow,
of the
nice.
pharaohs, nouns and verbs were in the
40
feminine,
streak,
as though
nice.
a queen were in question. I found the same peculiarity everywhere. And I have to admit, I would have been just as confused when I saw this statue of Hatshepsut in the Grand Egyptian Museum had I not had Walla there to explain why she was wearing the traditional male clothing and sporting a beard. But
sporting
why
a beard.
did Hatshepsut wear beards in her statues?
So.
And why was her name left off of the king lists? Well,
because they didn't want a girl on there, I guess.
A pharaoh in ancient Egypt. See, the traditional way to become a pharaoh was to be born the first son of the current pharaoh, provided that your mother was the
it says
great
on
royal
there.
wife. A pharaoh could have many, many wives, but there was always one great royal wife, a woman of royal blood, and it was through her line that pharaonic rule passed. The other two ways to become pharaoh was
put that up
one,
there.
to
Like, I know it's kind of
marry the
distracting.
daughter of the great royal wife or the great royal queen, and so you would be
there any way to,
connecting
make
that
the
bloodline, or to
subtitles
make
smaller?
up a story about how you are descended from the gods and hope that people buy it, especially getting the powerful priests on board with said story. Well, all of these ways are part of Hatshepsut's story. Hatshepsut was the daughter of the pharaoh Thutmose I and his great royal wife Amosa. But as she was a girl, any other son born to the pharaoh, even if it was from one of the lesser wives, would become pharaoh before she did. And that is exactly
I see,
what
yeah.
happened. This son,
Gosh darn
from another
patriarchy.
wife, the half-brother of Hatshepsut, would become Pharaoh Thutmose II. But since he needed to connect that bloodline to the great royal wife, he had to marry Hatshepsut. His half-sister, not something we typically do today, but rather common in ancient Egyptian politics.
Yeah, anything to preserve the royal bloodline, right?
And they did produce a child, but it was a daughter. But just like Thutmose I, Thutmose II, her husband, did produce a son via one of the lesser wives. This boy was creatively named Thutmose as well, and he would become Thutmose III. Well, Thutmose II died relatively young, before he was 30, and this put Thutmose III onto the throne. The only issue was he was only 2 years old.
So,
just
not really a good ruler now.
Thousands of years since, when a little kid goes onto the throne, they assign a regent to do all of the actual ruling, and that regent in this case was his stepmother, Hatshepsut. Well, that seems to have been just fine for a few years,
and for a little
but after a while, Hatshepsut decided, you know what, I don't want to be a regent.
Oh, she wants to go for the full thing.
Be pharaoh as well. And so she became co-pharaoh with Thutmose III. Now, she never denied him his pharaohship. They were just co-pharaohs together, but she did all of the ruling.
Well, Thutmose III was a kid.
She was not the eldest son of a pharaoh, first way you become pharaoh, and she couldn't marry a royal queen because she was the royal queen. And
Who
so
says?
she had to look to that third way of legitimizing her rule, make up a story about being descended from the gods and hope people buy it and get the priests on your side. And since she had her pick of the gods to make up a story about,
who'd she pick?
Picked Amun, the chief
Amun-Ra,
claiming that he was her actual father. The story of this divine birth claims that the god Amun took the form of her father, Thutmose I, one night and went to the queen Amosa. It was with Amun that Amosa conceived Hatshepsut, making Amun
more like a goat god, it seems.
This gave people permission to accept her as the pharaoh of Egypt, and it also made the numerous and very powerful priests of Amun very happy. Then she doubled
happy
down
all around,
on
it
this
seems,
by having 2 great obelisks built at the temple complex of Karnak and dedicated.
I'm still very surprised how they were able to erect such great obelisks. Jeez, that's pretty tall.
God's own voice saying, "Welcome, my sweet daughter, my favorite, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mat-Kare, Hatshepsut. Thou art the pharaoh, taking possession of the 2 lands." One of the obelisks still stands to this day and is the tallest standing obelisk left in Egypt. The obelisks also had an inscription which I find rather interesting. It says, "The king himself, erection of 2 great obelisks for her father, Amun-Ra, in front of the august colonnade." So there in one sentence,
like
it says the king himself, but then also refers to her. And this is the second issue with Hatshepsut's rule, the fact that she was a woman. Now, there was no technical law against having a woman be Pharaoh, but it just wasn't done because the Pharaoh was seen as the incarnation of the male falcon-headed god Horus. So having a female become the incarnation of a man just made some people feel a little uncomfortable.
Well,
so the way that
they
she
should get
dealt
with the
with
times.
this was to have her image portrayed wearing men's clothing and sporting the beard of pharaonic power. It wasn't that she was trying to fool anyone. Everyone knew she was a woman.
Just
It was
more sort of made it more,
a symbolic gesture, a nod to the male nature of kingship.
I
Now,
suppose.
with the crown firmly set atop her head,
And fake
it was
beard
time to
upon her
actually
chin.
do some ruling of Egypt. And by all accounts, most of them being from her, she was a great pharaoh and led Egypt through a bit of a golden age.
Hey, that's
She
pretty
opened
nice.
several trade routes that had collapsed at the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period, a few hundred years earlier, the most important seeming to be a trade mission that she sent to the land of Punt, likely in modern-day Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia.
Oh,
the mission
okay.
returned with enough
That one
goods
I'm
to stimulate
not
the
sure about the
entire
geography
economy,
of,
everything
but-
from gold and ivory to exotic animals, frankincense, and
Frankincense?
myrrh, including live trees which she planted around
She
the
was
kingdom,
brought from the Punt.
including
Oh, wow.
at her most lasting legacy, the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, or Jeser Jeseru, meaning holiest of holies. We
Dang,
got
it's
to
like
visit this
inset
site,
inside of
and
it.
even
It's
after
almost completely
3,500 years,
perfectly square too.
it is still incredibly impressive. Even the paint on some of the walls exposed to the elements is still vibrant with color. She had this built directly across the Nile facing her father's home, that
Oh.
is the temple of the god Amun at Karnak. Just another way to cement that
Try
design.
to make her seem like
She
she's
also had
part
the
of like this
walls
one.
of this temple decorated with her wonderful exploits, things like the trip to Punt and the divine birth. The only thing that she really
birth.
didn't seem to do that a pharaoh was expected to do was lead the army. That she left to her co-pharaoh, Thutmose III.
The
As soon as
kid?
he was old enough,
Oh.
she put him in charge of
I
the
see.
army, and he was
how old is
really
that?
good at it.
Oh, okay,
Perhaps
so he's
the
good at it.
greatest military mind of ancient Egypt. He never lost a battle, so good on her for seeing what he was able to do. This military
guess that's pretty
experience
nice.
of his also made it so he was more than ready to become sole pharaoh when Hatshepsut died around the age of 50.
guess that's her
likely
mummified
from
body.
bone cancer caused by a carcinogenic cream which she put all over her body.
Well,
so why, if
rip.
she was so great, is
Oopsies.
her name not included on the king lists? Well, it might be because she was a woman.
Uh-huh,
It might be
yeah.
because the people writing those lists didn't even know she existed.
Really?
Because shortly after her death, Thutmose III had her name wiped from history,
Oh,
or at least
he
tried.
wanted to.
Her images
You wanted to
were
try to,
defaced,
like, take-
and her name was chiseled out.
Yeah, try to
wherever
take
they
the glory,
could find it.
huh, of all
Only
those
because
accomplishments?
They didn't do as thorough a job as they should have. Do we know that she existed at all? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
help that because she was co-pharaoh, there is no actual break in the timeline to fit her in, because according to the lists, Thutmose III's reign started as soon as his father Thutmose II died. So Hatshepsut doesn't really have a place to sneak in. Now, exactly why Thutmose III had her name wiped from history is up for some debate. Many claim that it was because of a long-held resentment that he had toward her for stealing his power when he was a little boy. Others claim that it was simply a way to kind of clean up the narrative. Female pharaoh, two pharaohs at once. It's very, very confusing. And so
I'm sure they
let's
could have
just
done
get
it.
rid of her for the sake of
I'm sure there could have been a way to fit
Another
her
reason
in.
could be that because Thutmose III's heir, Amenhotep II, didn't have a direct blood tie to Hatshepsut, it was just easier.
Some believe
if
he
she
did
hadn't
much of the
happened, because
removal.
It might get
Oh,
people asking questions
see.
about his legitimacy. But whatever the reason, she was erased from history, at least enough so that centuries, millennia later, when Egyptologists came across her name, especially accompanied by an image of a male, it caused a lot of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
But
That would be
especially
confusing.
after the discovery of her mortuary temple, her legacy just cannot be entirely forgotten.
It's a pretty big thing to leave behind and try to get rid of, huh?
The grounds, you are in absolute awe of her and her accomplishments and the accomplishments of the ancient Egyptians as a whole. You'll ask yourself, exactly how did they build this? And are
aliens
those paintings of circles on the wall anything like the circles that Max is about to eat? I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to eat them regardless.
I'm sure you did just fine.
The ancient Egyptian Zalabia, as shown on the walls of temples and tombs all over Egypt. So again, this is too big, far too big. This is the size that you want, about the size of like a walnut or something.
Yeah, kind of like walnut size. Yeah.
Maybe 2 bites at most. Also, they can be covered in honey. Today they usually cover them in sugar syrup. They did not have sugar cane in Egypt at the time. They have lots of sugar cane now, but
well, yeah,
sugar syrup or some sort of rose water, or I've seen them done in chocolate and everything. So
Ooh,
you can't
chocolate.
put honey on them, especially because the modern version has a lot of sugar in the batter itself. I'm putting some honey in a dish here. The modern version has sugar in it, so they're very sweet. This just has a little bit of honey, so I'm curious. Let me try it actually first without. Let's give it a go.
Pop.
There's a little crunch on the outside. Nice and puffy.
Oh, there's something here.
It's actually very flavorful.
Oh,
You
okay.
get the cardamom coming through, which is really nice. But also that emmer wheat is just much more flavorful than say a modern flour. I will say that the modern version usually has several ingredients added that will add to the crunch on the outside when you fry them.
Really?
Things
That's
like
interesting.
like cornstarch. Adds that
Okay.
crunch.
Makes sense.
This has a little bit of a crunch, but not as crunchy as the modern version, which is nice. All right, adding a little honey on there does make it prettier. The thing is, you can't
Very
add
shiny,
the
yeah.
honey until you're about ready to eat it because it'll make it quite soggy. Here we go.
I guess so, like all the moisture and honey.
Now that is a food fit for the gods. Absolutely delicious. Yeah, really quite flavorful. Now, the thing is this what is on the walls? Maybe.
We don't know.
Almost definitely not exactly, because
Yeah.
they left us no recipe.
It could just be like
most of what we know
a
about
plate of dates, if anything.
the details of the food that they ate come from scientific testing of food left in tombs. Like King Tut's tomb, I did a whole video on the food that was found in his tomb. But many things just were never, preserved. So it's kind of a bit of guesswork. But it's fun, and it gives me an excuse to talk about interesting ancient Egyptian stories like that of Queen Hatshepsut. Also, I am going to keep you up to date on details about future river cruises that I'm leading. Places possibly like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Colombia. I'm not entirely sure, so
Yeah, I'll
keep
just have to find
watching
out that.
and you'll learn about that. Even better would be to sign up for the Tasting History newsletter, because
Ooh,
I'll probably
a newsletter,
send
huh?
that information out even before I post it in a video, so you will be the first to hear about it. So yeah, make some ancient Egyptian zalabia, or make the modern version of zalabia. They're really, really good. They're kind of like donuts, but not exactly.
Yeah, like kind of like donut
crispy
holes.
on the outside. Anyway, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
All right, that was the first. That was like a nice video. Got to learn more about like ancient Egypt, about like the queen as yeah. I'm still having a hard time with her name. About the almost forgotten queen of Egypt. So that's pretty fun, and sort of like, I guess, sort of kind of like Pharaoh politics that go with it. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for watching along with me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.